Okay, in this video, I'm going to talk through the digital realm and how we make digital audio recordings and how we make digital audio playback happen. And we build upon what we learned in Module 1, that there is a transfer of energy from acoustic energy into analog electrical energy. Generally, we are talking about that process, but also we are adding a digital realm to it. So we're starting in the acoustic realm as we usually do and converting it into analog electricity via input transducer, like a microphone, for instance. This analog step is very important as it is still a part of this digitization process. We need an analog electrical signal to be digitized. So our next step is for our computer to have a ADC convert our analog electrical signal, which is continuous electricity, into a series of ones and zeros, our digital realm. So we still need our ADC to convert our analog electrical signal to digital data, which is something only computers can understand. To reverse the process for playback, we start with a digital file, which also has to be reconverted back to an analog electrical signal before we can hear it. That has to go into a digital to analog converter, which takes it from the digital realm to analog, basically from ones and zeros to a continuous electrical signal. Then that electrical signal is then sent to an output transducer, for instance, a speaker, like your headphones, a speaker in a room, any sort of digital playback. So when I'm making a recording, I am speaking into a microphone. This is an analog microphone. That microphone is then going into a interface that is digitizing this sound and turning it into a block of data that is saved with the video. And then when you press play on the video to hear my sound, the video player is basically sending that audio to the same interface or to a computer's digital to analog converter that's a part of it. If it's on a phone, if it's on a tablet, doesn't matter. They all have a digital to analog converter that's going to change it back into an analog signal that can go to a speaker. So this process is extremely important because everything we do these days is in the digital realm. Computers are going to be using digital audio files, right, to make sounds either over the internet or on a CD, or if you stream it with Spotify or YouTube or iTunes or any of those sort of device services are playing music in a digital way. They are playing a digital audio file. The problem with this is that computers are extremely objective. Like the old saying goes that computers are really dumb. They just basically understand one or zero, on or off. The data chain has to be very, very complex, but it has to be broken down into a series of one or zero. Analog audio, however, is a continuous signal. Analog audio means it's analogous to the physical realm or the acoustic realm. So we need to basically translate for a computer. We need to convert it into data so that the computer can understand it. So computers must encode or measure a continuous signal and assign it a numerical value. This process is extremely important in the digital audio realm, and we get basically a file or a list of numerical values from this process. It's called data. That data is then saved as a digital audio file. We convert everything for a computer into data. Everything you see on screen, like a video, the images here you see, are all digitized. Books that you read online are digitized. Audio is digitized. Pictures are digitized. They're all converted into a block of ones and zeros. Anything that has a continuous electrical signal is regularly measured to create a data stream. We call this process of regular measurement sampling. Sampling is the continuous measurement of an incoming wave or signal type, whether it be electrical audio or a video signal or anything that is from the normal natural world that has to be converted into data. Sampling basically means that they are periodically taking a snapshot of this continuously moving entity and measuring it. The more snapshots and measurements you take, the more information you get and the more realistic your representation is. So if you would look at our original waveform and we only sample it twice, we get a very simple representation of it. If we sample it at 6 times, we get a more blocky but yet curved representation. But if we get more and more samples, we get a better fidelity or a higher, basically a resolution picture of this audio. So part of this is I like to use this video to help explain this because this is kind of well produced and a
digital audio.
nice
So I'm
way to
going to talk
explain it.
about the sample rate and bit depth. The act of capturing an amplitude value is called sampling. A sample is actually a static representation of a waveform in time. The amount of samples that are taken per second is what's called the sample rate. If we sample a 20 kHz frequency with a sample rate of 20 kHz, we only have one sample per completed.
So this quickly goes into the discussion of sample rate. And I like to use the comparison of a strobe light to this discussion, because a strobe light goes as a blinking light at a certain speed, and it's a steady state speed. If you slow down the blinking light and look at something moving in a dark room, you get a very disjunct vision of what is actually happening. It looks like an old movie from, 100 years ago or something. If you speed up that light, you get more and more measurements of that moving thing, and it looks more and more natural. So the sampling rate is connected directly to the how realistic a sound is sampled. So we are going to start talking then about how much sampling we do in comparison to the frequency of the wave. So remember that a waveform is a continuously moving thing. If it has a pitch, it has a cycle of certain amount of vibrations per second. So in this case, we're talking about a 20 kilohertz frequency. So that's at the height of our human hearing range. Our human hearing range is 20 to 20 kilohertz, 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. And at the height of our frequency range is 20 kilohertz. And if we only measure, if our sample rate is exactly the same as our 20 kilohertz tone, this is explaining that we get only 2 measurements of that waveform. So we need more than that in order to get a good idea of what this is actually sounding like. So we have to increase the sample rate to get a proper picture of a 20 kilohertz sound. So our sample rates for most digital audio is much higher than 20 kilohertz. I'll let it play.
We only have one sample per completed cycle. To capture the positive and negative side of the cycle, we'll need to have a sampling rate that is double the frequency that we're sampling. In other words, to capture a 20 kilohertz frequency, we'll need to have a sample rate of at least 40 kilohertz.
So this is going to start talking about how we need to measure at least twice the highest frequency that we are sampling. So that means our human hearing range goes up to 20 kilohertz. We need to sample of at least 40 kilohertz to get a good representation of all the sounds in our spectrum.
This is the basics of the Nyquist theory by Harry Nyquist. The highest frequencies that we're sampling can cause some aliasing errors and other problems. And thus these can't be properly captured. We'll need to filter off the highest frequencies that we're sampling with a low-pass filter, and this is the reason we'll need to get a higher sampling rate than 40 kilohertz to properly capture a 20 kilohertz frequency. Keeping in mind that then the cutoff frequency of the filter is around 20 kilohertz, so we don't lose too much of the original signal.
So basically what he's talking about is to try to get the best fidelity of sound from this sample rate, we are going to sort of gradually attenuate the incoming signal and rolling off at 20 kilohertz to decrease the amount of aliasing, or basically audio issues that occur when your sample rates do not align. So in the process of converting to data, we are looking at a device that does this sampling for us. This is called the analog to digital converter. The ADC is extremely important. It converts a continuous analog electrical signal into a data stream, and it is part of any digital audio signal path. Conversely, on the other side of the playback path, we have a digital to analog conversion process where we are basically re-encoding the data to become a analog audio signal. And so when we look at this in more detail and sort of overlay this upon what we've done so far with these flowcharts, our input transducer is taking our acoustic energy and converting it to electrical signal that goes into a preamp and an ADC. That is often at the same step or in the same box. We call those digital audio interfaces. A digital audio interface is a box that you connect to your device to basically act as a preamp and an ADC all in one. So often you'll plug your microphone cable into your digital audio interface, and then out of it will be a data cable, like a USB cable. So at this point, it is no longer audio, it is now data. That data file can be transferred, uploaded, downloaded, emailed, etc. And when you hit play, your computer is reading that block of data, sending it back into the DAC, and that is also in your digital audio interface. That DAC is then turning it into an electrical audio signal, which then goes to your speaker. So the block of data is made up of ones and zeros, and this is just a quick discussion about what is in that block of data, bits and bytes, what that means, and what basically we are talking about when we talk about file size. Actually, I'm going to trim this out. I think we're going to make this a part of a second video because we're already getting into a whole lot of stuff. So just to cycle back, I just changed my mind. I think we're going to make this the end of our video about digital audio playback path. You can definitely check out more with this video, which I'll link here, which goes through the details about bit depth and sample rate, which will also be included in our second video.